thanks, Darren. Thanks for that. So we're going to be handing off throughout this presentation, and then hopefully have a lot of time for questions from all of you. So where to start? Like all good things, I guess you start with a plan. So Edmonton's story sort of starts, or where we're going to start today at least, is the 2009 bicycle transportation plan that got approved by City Council, and it in it had a bunch of different bicycle facilities that could be used. There was a focus on acknowledging that there were different types of riding skills. And there was this idea that you might be able to progress from being a novice cyclist to one that is more confident, I guess, over time. So sort of acknowledging the 4 types of cyclists, but in slightly different terms. Again, this is 2009, and the idea was that everyone was going to be within a 5-minute within 5 minutes of a good bike route. This is a little bit fuzzy, but basically the network included 2 different types of corridors: a citywide system, which were analogous to your maybe bicycle superhighways or your major arterials if you're thinking about vehicles, and that would be a connected grid throughout the city to acknowledge the fact that our destinations and origins are dispersed throughout the city. Then the green network, the connector network, is a lower network, more internal to neighborhoods, and would be linking people from their neighborhoods to this citywide system. Within the bike plan, at that time, best practice for the infrastructure was really rapidly changing. I think it's really important to highlight that. So in the plan, it's sort of, there's this graphic in there that talks about the citywide network and the types of facilities that might be used, and the connector network, and similarly the types of facilities, and the arrow sort of points to where thinking at the time was. And so you can see there was sort of this focus on bike lanes a little bit at that point. So in terms of rolling this thing out and implementing it, there wasn't a lot of dedicated funding to do this, so we had to follow pavers in order to get bike projects in place. And what that meant was that we were following them wherever they were doing their work, which was sort of all over the city. So it was really about, at this point, building a bike network on a shoestring budget. So if you think about traveling to Europe, how you did that as a college student versus how you would do that as an adult that might be a little bit more gainfully employed, or like Darren, he's always the excellence in his travels, the top notch. So we were definitely on the lower budget scale of the budget in terms of trying to roll this out. But we achieved some really good outcomes, we felt. From 2009, when it was approved, you can see the blue bars there is the increase in the kilometers of bicycle facilities that were installed throughout the city. They went up quite dramatically, from less than 10 to just over 230 kilometers. Collisions went down dramatically over that same period. And we saw usage on these corridors, wherever we built infrastructure, going up 80 to 90%. So, more bike lanes meant increased use, increased safety. We're all winning, right? Well, not so much. The mayor at the time, 2013, this was an election year, or leading up to an election, wasn't too happy with the bike lanes. There was nice quasi-comical cartoons in the newspapers about, because we were basically following pavers, the network wasn't all that connected. And so what that led to was, following the election, there was removal of bike lanes on a number of corridors that were installed. So this gave us some pause, made us a little concerned, and thinking, okay, well, obviously we need to think about things differently here. How do we implement the bike plan and be more successful and get more support for that? So we started a campaign called What the Bike is Going On. With that, we talked to a bunch of counselors, and we talked to them about the importance of a number of things. We wanted to focus on the central area of Edmonton, where we already knew there was high usage of bicycling. This is where the downtown is in Edmonton, the University of Alberta, some shopping corridors. Both Olga, actually all of us, Olga, myself, and Conrad lived there, so we had personal invested interest. But it is where people are cycling more often right now. We wanted to also focus on creating a connected network, not following the pavers. That just wasn't working, and it wasn't leading to a network that allowed somebody to get on it and get to their final destination. You'd end up having a bike lane end sign, for instance, which isn't a very good level of service or quality of service. really wanted to focus on all ages and abilities routes as well, which meant we also couldn't follow pavers. We needed dedicated funding to make this happen. The councillors, through the election and a number of different meetings they had, they really felt that we also needed to include a new 6-part consultation process. And instead of using the bike plan as a definitive plan where a bike route, say, was on street Z, and that when we started to implement that route that it had to be on street Z, we could actually, the first part of the consultation was understanding where that bike route should be, because a lot of things have changed since the bike plan was approved. So that was, I think, an important decision as well. And the council told us to bring forward some funding packages to make these central area routes that are pictured on the slide here reality. So our team went ahead and did that, pulled together a bunch of capital budget sheets and presented them to our senior leadership within administration, and it was decided that compared to other priorities, they weren't the priority. So they went forward as being unfunded, so still part of the budget package, but they weren't identified as funded through the city administration process. And that's where the Edmonton Bicycle Coalition got involved to advocate for funding because of the importance of this, and that's where the beginning of Conrad is. So I'll let him take over here.
All right, thanks, Tyler. So this is a blurry picture of me and my family circa 2013, and so we were living centrally, loving life without a car, living, getting outside every day, being active. But this was despite bike infrastructure that looked like this. I mean, not all the time, obviously, but it was, as Tyler said, it was built on the cheap, and then it wasn't supported, so there wasn't any operational money that went to keep the lanes clear. And you can see, I think it'd be obvious to anyone that I wouldn't take those kids on this road. Neither me or my spouse would do that. So the kids were riding on the sidewalks. And we were riding, choosing residential streets, but it was less than perfect. Now, actually, I left out of these slides. I just kind of realized this morning something that happened in Edmonton in 2012, which is a 19-year-old university student was riding on our so-called main walkable street, White Avenue, and he was struck and killed. And so he was doing everything right. He wasn't on the sidewalk, which is illegal in Edmonton, and he was even wearing a helmet. And he unfortunately passed away. So this was a real, personally, I remember feeling sick that whole day that I heard about that. And this was the beginning of my real concern about what was happening. So yeah, so in 2014, City Council was going to vote on a 4-year capital budget plan, and as Tyler said, these 2 high-quality routes that were in the plan were in our bike plan, went to council unfunded, and so and actually that year there were $0 for active transportation in the multi-billion-dollar capital budget. So we were quite unhappy about this. Needless to say, my I guess neighbors and friends and I, and so we just around a kitchen table one day, we formed the Edmonton Bike Coalition. So we just made up a name and decided that we were a thing and went for it. So what we did, and yeah, I should point out that this budget vote happened in I think November or early December. So it was August, and we started the iBike campaign. So we asked people to send us pictures of them biking. The idea was to show that this isn't some faction of weirdos who are road warriors in spandex on the road. Although there's nothing wrong with that, Tyler. You can do that if you, yes.
Not all the time.
But yeah, that these are just people who happen to live centrally and want to get to get around safely. So we got over 1,100 photos sent in, and there was a we made a photo mosaic out of them, and so we were priming this on social media, on Facebook. Also, we held an extensive email campaign around it, and we also had a event at City Hall. So what ended up happening, we were really happy. City Council injected those two high-quality routes back into the budget, right? So 102 Ave and also 83rd Avenue in like early December of 2014. So we considered it a victory and kind of relaxed for a while and sat back and waited for our bike lanes to roll in.
Yeah, and so I was at the City of Edmonton at the time, so we kept rolling with the What the Bike program, because what we wanted to focus on for these routes were these all ages and abilities infrastructure. The trick was that stuff didn't exist in Edmonton at that time. Not really, anyway. We had separated shared pathways adjacent within road rights of way or in parkland or utility corridors, but we didn't have any on-street protected bike lanes, cycle tracks, separated bike lanes, whatever you want to call them. We also didn't have true bicycle boulevards anywhere in town. So one of the things we wanted to do as part of this rollout is have an education campaign as part of our engagement for those routes. And so we had a bunch of, we set up a pilot basically with some traffic cones, traffic signs. Olga was leading this from the traffic ops. I remember it was a bit of a rush, and she did amazing work as usual to get everything approved. It was a 2-block segment coordinated with a farmer's market on a weekend, over the weekend, so people could actually try this with their kids. We had a library of bicycles that they could get on and use if they didn't bring a bicycle with them. And what we actually found was people were coming out because of the strong media presence and coverage of this event. They were coming out to see these bike lanes and experience this, and then they were going to the farmer's market, and so bicycles mean business. But from there, as Conrad sort of alluded to, as we were rolling through that 6-part consultation process, it was taking some time. And there's also, if you work in infrastructure in the engineering fields, that there's also coordination issues with utilities and all kinds of other things, like rail transit projects here in Edmonton. So these bike lanes were going to be taking a long time to really come to be constructed and operational for everybody to provide the benefits that we were looking for, which is a safer, more affordable, more equitable community. So at the same time, Stantec was doing all this work with the City of Calgary to implement a downtown bike grid. And with this bike grid, they used adjustable materials so that they could test the design and adjust and make adjustments along the way. This is their network and a graphic of their downtown and the network that went ahead. And they basically use those temporary materials to transform streets like this, which is 12th Avenue Southwest, into something like this. So introduce a lot of two-way protected bike lanes that are separated from parking and traffic lanes, and they had new signals, bicycle-specific signals installed as well, and it really transformed the way the community looked downtown and who was coming downtown by bicycle. A lot of families, and they communicated the results of this, and so we were quite envious at Edmonton. You could see from this graphic the proportion of women cycling went up quite a bit. Overall support from a third-party opinion poll showed that almost 2/3 of the community was in support of these. They came in under budget, increased bicycle usage, so all kinds of really good news stories. And this is where, again, Conrad swooped in to try to change the conversation here in Edmonton.
So yeah, in late 2015, we were starting to realize that we were going to have to do more than just a 4-month campaign, to get a couple of bike routes funded. So we founded Paths for People, and so the focus of Paths for People is high quality bike and walk infrastructure in central Edmonton. Part of our vision and culture has always been of the people who ended up forming Paths for People has always been that again, like, this is normalized transportation. This shouldn't be about identity. In the same way, a lot of people own vacuums, but they're not called vacuumists. Bikes, right? We're just people who want to get around on bikes, and walking is. Biking is a lot more like fast walking rather than slow driving, right? And so, bike and walk go together, and both people on bikes and people walking are vulnerable road users. So that was our kind of initial vision, we incorporated as a nonprofit as well. And so our first big event was City for Life. Okay, and so we had this in April of 2016, and so the key to this, and was really the vision of my co-founder of Fast for People, Anna Ho. And so, I mean, it was the easy part was thinking, let's get Gil Penalosa to come and do a talk. And anyone who's an activist or an advocate and who's listening to this, he's worth it. And actually, he gave us a great nonprofit rate and stuff. But he is so inspirational. I had someone, I think 2 days ago, come up to me and talk about how they had been to see Gil Penalosa at City for Life. So he's just wonderful in so many ways. But the key is that Anna kind of had a laser focus on not only having a public talk, but also, which was on a Friday, but also the next morning to have a smaller workshop. And so there were about 40 people. These were thought leaders from around the city, also the mayor, senior administration, and 4 counselors. So we had 5 counselors out of the 13 votes or 7 votes that are, because there's 13 of them in all, that are needed to get something to happen in Edmonton. So and this is like part of what Fast for People has done is kind of like a fake it till you make it thing, right? So we just had the confidence that we were a big enough deal to throw this event, and then Anna was like, well, I'm going to get the mayor to come, and I was like, oh, really? We can do that? Invite the mayor? And with Anna, it's less invite than just tell him that he's coming. So she's like one of her superpowers is getting people to come to meetings. So anyways, this was a real I think seminal event. Everyone left that day feeling positive about what could happen in the future. And Gil told us, do something in the next 6 months, right? Because it's so easy for these things to drag into 2, 3 year, 4 year things. So Gil's gone. It's the spring of 2016, last year. This new bike plan, that kind of overarching bike strategy that the next wave of it hadn't been started yet, as far as I knew. One of the city administrators told me that there was going to be this new citywide consultation that was going to take 1 to 2 years, and I think that this question was meant to provoke, to provoke people during this consultation, but she told me that we're going to ask questions like, should Edmonton even be making facilities for transportation at all, or should it just be for recreation? So I think my face went purple, and I managed not to pass out when I heard that and kind of stumble away. So frustration was mounting. Also 4 planned bike routes including the 83rd Ave and 102 Ave, bike lane that we had won funding for in 2014 or been part of that. They were taking a long time to complete. So Tyler mentioned this 6-part consultation process. It feels like 60 parts, and it just goes forever. It's an 18 to 24-month consultation, and the 83rd Ave bike route is 17 blocks. Right, so we're just thinking, okay, we still are in the exact same place that we were last year. So finally, also because of this consultation process, and Edmonton has a short construction season, we were sitting looking at each other, thinking, okay, we're years away from the next round of bike routes. So what do we do? So I don't mean to be negative, but really last spring we're feeling quite, I guess, frustrated. So we had an idea for this downtown bike grid. Why not copy Calgary's downtown bike network? Theirs was an 18-month pilot, and we actually started out using the word pilot, and then we figured politically, why would we throw that in there unless we have to? So we just started calling it adaptable, low cost, right? And so with this, the product would be the consultation, because it's adaptable, right? That was our idea. Then we had this other idea. We'll get a design firm to partner with us on a white paper, and donate half of the cost of the feasibility study in kind. So you know, how can city administration say no, right? So we made a meeting with them and went to them, and they said no. But fair enough, you know, they actually said we need political direction on this one, and you know, I'm not blaming them. You know, it's as you saw earlier from Tyler's presentation. You know, bike lanes have been a really hot topic, and up until this point, they had largely failed. So okay, you know, we need political direction. So June of last year, we met with 3 friendly city councilors, and you know, I gave a presentation, and it was very emotional. Like I was angry, and also I should add that like the week before this young girl, 11-year-old, was hit on her bike in South Edmonton and severely injured. So you know, we're the ones living on like kind of, we are the eyes on the street seeing this and living with this emotionally, and so we just didn't feel that there was that urgency, and I ended that meeting by saying that we have no more avenues for positive advocacy. And we actually had an alternative plan, and up until then we had been very forward thinking, very creative, very positive, you know, images of regular people on bikes, but we were kind of at wit's end. So to their great credit, these 3 city councilors, Scott McKean, Ben Henderson, and Andrew Knack, started scheming right in front of us. Okay, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to get the city to partner with Stantec, which was the you know, design firm that had agreed to donate half of the cost of this feasibility paper? How are we going to make this work? And so, and I don't actually understand all of the details, but there was this meeting on July 12th, and they just put forward a motion that set everything into motion, I guess. So we were thrilled and elated, and since then I've just been, well, no, we actually have done some campaigning, but largely sitting back and watching Olga not have a life for the year after that. So I'll pass this on to her, I think.
Which is pretty accurate, actually. So here we are, July 12th. You know, we had a very unusual motion, and that administration partner with Stantec to provide a feasibility study on whether or not a minimum downtown bike network would be appropriate. So, you know, to that first point, it is important to note that it is a very unusual ask, and you know, I understand the audience may be broad, and but if you're not familiar with civic process, it is unusual for City Council to pass a motion like this, and work specifically with consultants to prepare feasibility studies. Often, administrations undertake this type of work through an established procurement process. So, so this was very unique, but definitely was how this project was given the success to proceed. So, you know, within that motion, you know, there were some very specific elements that were identified that would be deliverables in the report, and you know, that was to use relatively inexpensive temporary infrastructure, bollards, mobile concrete curbs, and these were all elements that were taken from Calgary's pilot project. Tyler, go ahead to the next slide, please.
Sure. Yeah, so the motion was made. I was in New Zealand at the time doing work with Darren, actually, and so had to procure flights back early to come back to try to do this. And so for this, we were calling it Fast Tracks. At the beginning, it's now been rebranded to the Downtown Bike Grid. Still kind of like the Fast Tracks idea, but anyway. So we started this project. We were going to complete this whole thing in 3 weeks, basically the feasibility study. So it was pretty crazy timelines and needed a lot of one-on-one discussion and collaboration with the city to make this possible. So we started with principles. We built the principles based on what we had done previous on 83rd Avenue and 102 Avenue, the public consultation. We also, these are pretty typical principles from the Crow Manual, and also were very common and consistent with the principles we had used for the Calgary cycle track network that Stantec also did. So from that, we basically were adapting the approach that we used in Calgary to Edmonton, and so we first did an initial screening of the transportation network from a traffic operations perspective to see which corridors were looking fairly congested and maybe not as optimal candidates for the network. Then we went into a secondary screening that looked at a number of other items, including a closer look at traffic operations if we were to reduce or remove capacity. And then we went forward with potential designs, looking at, based on the available corridors, their widths, maintenance requirements, had lots of chats actually with the City of Calgary's maintenance team to think through that, and then looked at typical mid-block design and intersection designs. So what this meant was our scope was quite big. So the study area was this blue downtown area. The original motion actually was for all of central Edmonton, which we kindly said, we don't think we can tackle that in the time allowed. What we can do is focus on the downtown. So we looked at this downtown. To give you a bit of context, this is the land use context that I pulled together pretty quick, and my artistic skills are limited. But you can see that there's different areas of employment. There's sort of institutions, post-secondary and government institutions, sort of in various spots throughout the downtown. There's some shopping areas, and then we have residential concentration in certain areas of the downtown as well. So as you can imagine, people are trying to get from outside the downtown to the downtown to get to all these different destinations, and from within the downtown, if you're a downtown resident like myself, to these destinations, and also outside the downtown to get to all kinds of wonderful places in our community. So we started looking at the analysis. This is a graphic showing the traffic capacity and operations in a very simplistic way to show which streets were under, approaching, or at or over capacity if we were to remove lanes of traffic to put in the cycle tracks or protected bike lanes. The gray ones were ones that we didn't consider for the secondary traffic analysis because they're primary either transit corridors and or commuting corridors that we thought because of the ability to provide a pretty robust network without them, that, you know, why would we tackle those streets that would cause a lot of controversy. So after we did that whole process that I outlined in the first slide there, the fast track steps, when we did the initial and secondary screening and then looked at the potential designs, we came up with a network that are the green lines. The yellow lines were removed after secondary screening. 105th Avenue is the one that runs east-west on the north side. I think you'll be able to see my cursor, but here. And Olga's going to talk a little bit more about that one. But you can see from the network, it's pretty robust, and it gets you within about 2 blocks of every single destination within the downtown. Some of it will be built with a light rail line, the purple dashed portion, but everything else is going to be built as part of this project. Now, what's really important, I think, to highlight, to sort of zoom out a little bit and why this project is so critical to the community, is that there's a fairly large gap within Edmonton's network. I think, like most communities, there's pretty good trails through parkland and through some roadways, old rail lines that can feed to a downtown, much like Edmonton, but we had this big void in the downtown, which is right here. And so with the bike grid, we really filled that. And this includes a couple other projects that are underway at the same time, but you can see that within this year, you're going from a big donut, basically, and no real safe way to get through downtown, to essentially a pretty connected network on the north side. There's also some routes on the south side that are coming over time this year and next year. So while these are coming to fruition in a fairly consolidated, condensed time frame, what's important to note is that some of these have been taking a number of years to come to fruition, except for the bike grid, which is 9 months. And so with that, I'm going to give it back to Olga to talk about how she took this feasibility study and made it in details on the street.
Yeah, so you know, actually, it's really important to note. I think you know, this project would not have had the success that it had initially and from the start was without a lot of campaigning from Paths for People. And you know, when City Council was faced with the decision to go ahead with the downtown bike network, they were presented with 46 letters of support from various businesses, education institutions, supporting a downtown bike network. And so this was critical on a few levels. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about it, but in order for this project to be a success and to be delivered under such short timelines, we were not afforded an upfront engagement opportunity. So, you know, you heard Conrad talk about our engagement strategy and it taking so long, and that was it was very important because of some of our shortcomings with the previous painted bike lanes. You know, we were told that our engagement strategy was not very well built, and that needed to change. So, you know, enter the 83rd Ave and 102 Ave bike routes, and some of the lessons learned from that engagement process. We were able to apply some of those learnings into the downtown bike route. But to happen, basically the engagement was to happen after the implementation. So that's where we're at right now. So, you know, aside from the 46 letters of support, many citizens had sent emails campaigning for that same support. So that was also very important. I think I'm good now. I think this is your next slide, Conrad.
Sorry,
Okay.
I accidentally clicked.
It's okay.
Okay, yeah. So yeah. After that, you know, we got the motion in July. You know, we did do a few more things. We made some videos, and we also collected those 46 letters, and we also harnessed what I believe is our most important asset, which is our 900 plus person email list, and so we worked at that, and also social media very hard, and you can see that on October 11th, there was a unanimous vote for this bike grid network, and so we were thrilled and also grateful. I believe that our mayor behind the scenes did some work, you know, to make this happen, and so yeah, at that point we were quite elated.
Sorry, Olga. Now it's back to you.
Back to me. And you know, and it happened very fast. So fast, in fact, that I was headed to council that day, and I was running behind from another meeting, and I'm text messaging with Daniel Vrind, who was a big part of the partnering with Stantec on the feasibility report, and you know, just as I was running to council, he just sent me a text and said, "It's over, it's done, we're approved."
Get
so,
to work.
you know, just like that. Yeah, and that's when it all started and ended.
This was the most relaxing time for me.
Yeah. So here we go. So we were given a budget of $7.5 million to build, at the time, 7.1 kilometers of protected on-street bike lane and shared use path. If you notice, and Tyler, if you have mouse control, if you could guide over the 105 Ave portion. So 105 Ave, and this is actually a really important part of this project. That this portion was not part of what was ultimately decided to be the downtown bike network. We initially had shared use path running on the sidewalk of 104th Avenue from 110th Street all the way to 96th Street. And unfortunately, we've had fortunately, we've had some changes within the downtown. But unfortunately, it spelled a few impacts on how those sidewalks would be used. And one of our greatest challenges was that this shared use path was running alongside one of our major education institutions, and that was MacEwan University, and the newly opening Rogers Place Arena. So Rogers Place Arena only just opened last fall. And so at that time, the impacts on the sidewalks were not necessarily known. But after some further review, we did a study. We conducted a road safety audit as well, and it was recommended that at that time that we revisit a new route for that north boundary. So we took a chance. and we looked at 105 Ave for a second time. So 105 Ave is our future Columbia Avenue streetscape, and we do have some bike route that was completed last year on 105 Ave between 119th Street and 116th Street that connects a shared use path to the northwest. So that was a real key connection, and part of the forethought again as to why 105 Ave was such an important connection for the downtown bike network. But we had a problem. The pavement was in terrible condition, and the next plan for this corridor is a complete reconstruction, but that's some time away. So we took a risk, and we found a window in some paving to do a small mill and overlay to be able to operate a safe, functional route on 105 Ave. So that's, and to be honest with you, that was a small deviation and small cost in general when we talk about the greater cost of the bike network. And jokingly within the office, we talk about the downtown bike network, and we say that it's actually largely a signaling project with a bike lane attached. And which reflects a lot of the costs. Of that $7.5 million, $4.2 million was dedicated to the upgrading of our downtown signaling network, which is pretty antiquated. I would say at its youngest, it's over 20 years old, and at its oldest, it's probably over 40 years old. It's not modern. We weren't able to communicate effectively with our signals within the downtown. Any changes would involve manual labor and actually sending staff out to visually confirm what was happening. So the signaling network was huge, and I'm not merely talking about the addition of bike fixtures either, but we overhauled entire traffic cabinets and controllers, and the communication system went from copper wire to a Wi-Fi, like a wireless network. And so now we have a greater ability to be able to communicate back to that network, to isolate problems and to make changes on the fly if we need to. And so, and the network itself, you're kind of looking at how we were building the facility itself. It's just flex posts, pavement markings, precast concrete curb, and it was just really reallocating road space. So no major construction was involved in the design of this project. Next slide, please, Tyler. So this is a sample of what one of our preliminary designs looked like. We have many iterations of how we came to our final product, but just just for an overview, the preliminary design of the bike route started literally the day that that council directed us to proceed with the rapid implementation of this project. And by early spring, we had completed the preliminary design, and the design was actually sent to an independent road safety auditor for review and to provide some recommendations. Tyler pointed this out early on in a slide that that a lot of bicycle transportation, I think in North America, I could safely say, has been in a state of evolution, and we've gone from painted bike lanes to fully protected networks. And as rapidly as this project came together, it was a rapid learning process for our end as well in terms of design. So we really wanted to make sure that we had some oversight and expertise, and the independent road safety audit was an important component of that. Another thing that we were challenged with was that in Edmonton and Alberta in general, we don't have any developed guidelines. Ontario has, I think it's called Book 18. There are a lot of manuals out there that that show municipalities how to go about constructing infrastructure, but we did not have that. We literally have just like we have 2 pages in our pavement marking manual on how to install a reserve painted bike lane. So so this was a learning for us as a design group as well. In Edmonton, we're a steering committee member in the development of the Alberta Bicycle Facilities Design Guide, but that project is some time away. But in the meantime, we were able to, from this project, we were able to draw some guidelines and best practices to be able to apply to some of the projects that are actually ongoing today and be able to provide that continuity. And so that was an important piece for us. Next slide, please. So with the downtown bike network aside, we talk about we talked about this project, filling a gap, and we talk about the time that it took to get here with the other projects that started in 2014. But I should note that 2017 is going to be a big year for cycling in Edmonton, and with the bike network aside, and the bike network is up and running, 105 Ave should be complete by the end of August. We are going to have 5 other active transportation projects that will also see a certain level of completion in 2017 and 2018 as well. So 2017 is definitely a big one for bikes. So taking that step back and learning what we did, really made the downtown bike network happen. Next slide, Tyler. So we essentially, we've gone through this this rapid 8-month process of being able to move through procurement at lightning fast speed. We had this amazing political support to make this all happen. I think before I really dive into the operations, because this was also an area that we had to overhaul in that 9-month time frame as well. We really were able to move so quickly with this project and leverage a lot of existing contracts and move rapidly through an existing procurement process. Most projects wouldn't see this kind of green light and support, but this was very important for us as an administration and for our council to see through. So we really fast-tracked a lot of process. Let's just put it that way. And same with our operations. We looked at the downtown network, and we look at how the bike network operates today. And initially, we talked about getting it all in and making adjustments as we go. And I increasingly became a little bit uncomfortable with that. And we came at it with the philosophy of let's get it at 99%, and that includes all of the signals work, includes all of the radiuses, all the intersection operations, signing everything. So it was an intensive project for the last 8 months just to get it at that 99%. And so today what we're looking at is we're looking at a functioning bike network where we haven't had to make any major changes within the last 2 months. And a lot of major changes that we did make, we made right at the implementation stage, not in the operations stage. So things like the bike turn boxes, for example, we had to, we installed our first bike turn box and immediately saw that, hey, you know what, this isn't going to work. So, grinding that out and moving it over, and then looking at the entire system and making that decision of protecting those boxes rather than keeping them at heads of crosswalks. So, a lot of these things happened almost as a field design, and that's kind of where we're at right now. Like ultimately, at the end of this entire process, we're going to have an as-built set of drawings rather than rather than like a solid design, because it's, we are expecting that there could be some changes down the road. So far to date, we haven't had to do any signals modification. Although we are in a process of evaluating the bike network, and that's going to be happening over the next 18 months. At this stage, we're not seeing any major changes. We'll have another look again in September when traffic volumes pick up in the downtown, but so far we've ordered operations such that things are working fine. And within, I talk about this rapid 18-month development of the network. The maintenance is actually was really important to look at as well. And I had the opportunity to be at the Winter Bike Congress in Montreal, and maintenance was at the forefront of the Congress. And one of the greatest successes of a winter city being able to support this type of infrastructure is having a robust and well thought out snow and ice control policy. And so we were able to take some of those learnings back from Montreal and other winter cities and re-examine our existing snow and ice control policies to better reflect the priority of the user and really highlight that 5 centimeters of snow for a vulnerable road user is a significant roadblock in being able to get out of the house and being able to ride a bike in the winter. So this is going to be year one with implementing our new snow and ice control policy. And so I'm glad that we're going to be able to do so in a focused environment, especially on the downtown bike network. Next slide, please. So, in terms of our operations, and again, we have only been operating for two months, so I can't give you a real detailed snapshot of what the bike network looks like, but so far so good. We have near doubled our ridership numbers, and the bike network is operating safely. One of the guiding principles in the operations and design, because this all happened together, operations was at the table, as was design, while these plans were being put together, and that was very important. The collaboration between departments was critical in this success. But as a group, we determined that safety would trump convenience in many cases. And whereas before we were looking at preserving roadway operations as closely as possible, that's not always the best decision. And so we looked at separating a lot of conflicting movements. We protected vehicle turns from crossing bikes. Turn bays were created where they didn't exist before, and some parking was lost. One of the biggest successes in these operations was launching the cyclist, pedestrian, and motorist education campaigns, and that's all ongoing right now. We're at phase 2 of our motorist education campaign, because phase 1 wasn't far-reaching enough. So we're at phase 2, and I think we talk about this network being adaptable. We also had to keep in mind that as we were moving through this engagement and education process, that also had to be adaptable. So one of the messages that we really gave back to the citizens of Edmonton was that we were absolutely serious about safety in this case. And on average, we're typically seeing about 3% growth in cycling, and considering that perhaps this was a population that we weren't taking into account, safety was paramount. So right now, phase 2, we're moving through with the education campaign and our reach, and this is actually really critical if you're a municipality looking at entering this realm of rapidly implemented infrastructure. It is absolutely critical to reach out and engage with your local police service and your motor association. Emergency medical services was also a critical one for us as well, and vehicle for hire. So these are some of our highest road users. And next slide, and I think that might be it. Yes. So, so I think this is kind of something for all of us where, you know, individually between myself, Tyler, and Conrad, you know, we've all put together the key factors for success. And Tyler, I'm gonna let you go ahead.
Sure. I just want to quickly mention too that Olga didn't go into this because she's a mature adult, and I'm not as good at being that. But like, she was absolutely key to this project, and so like in my mind, she's this like lead singer of a punk rock band, and like there's this, you know, old school engineer who was blocking her, and she kicks in their door and she says, you know, sorry, but the bike grid is gonna go there or whatever. So I mean, she's just absolutely, I mean, this project could have failed on so many levels, and she's just grabbed it and run with it and made it happen. So yeah, my kudos to you, Olga. It's been amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Kick butt.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna fly through these key factors because I think we'll probably address some of the questions and stuff, and I want to make sure we have time for questions from folks that are listening or hopefully participating. So one of the big things is I think we can all agree the community support, business support was pretty critical. Stantec as an employer was all over this, obviously, but it wouldn't have happened without somebody instigating it like Paths for People. I think the collaboration, the feasibility study was super quick, and we needed to have some pretty solid understanding of what we were up against through that process. So our mutual collaboration during that really rapid delivery phase last fall, I guess, into summer, was really important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have hit those timelines and got it back to council, and then hopefully it had answered a lot of the questions. Obviously, Olga and their team had to make some other adjustments through its implementation, but I think that was really important. Building from others' experience, this is important for, as you heard, snow and ice control, maintenance, that kind of stuff, but also our experience in Calgary was really critical to bring that forward because we had tried and tested a lot of things there that we could basically you know, instigate and migrate over to Edmonton and then adjust appropriately. The way we evaluated the network, it was a multiple perspective, so multiple account, if you hear that term. We were looking at the impacts and the benefits for all people, and I think that's really important to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. One of the things we, as traffic engineers, transportation engineers, sometimes we have a lot of jargon and crazy terms that we use that we understand that nobody else does, and so presenting our analysis in really easy to understand visuals, I think, is really important to communicating that. And if you have somebody on your team like we have in Rock Miller from Irvine, who's been doing this stuff for 40 years, he can explain this stuff to decision makers and really get them to understand quite clearly. The adaptable design, I think, is really important. In Calgary, for instance, that they made over 100 adjustments in the 18 months that they were running their pilot, and I think it's a really good proven method to getting something out there and not being afraid to do that, knowing that you can make the improvements over time. Olga's team has tried to learn as much as they could from Calgary to make those adjustments, as you heard, before it was implemented, but there will certainly be changes I would foresee with the network. Calgary as well as Edmonton, I think Olga's already shared early results of the increase in usage on the Edmonton downtown grid, and Calgary did a masterful job of this. Communicating results is really important to share what is happening and also to share the stories, and this is, I think, where advocates in particular are really important to share the stories about what this is doing to their membership and to the community, the improvement that it provides. And lastly, education is really important. This stuff is new to most communities, and so understanding what the pavement markings mean and the signs mean for all road users is really important. So whether you're driving or walking or cycling or taking transit, you need to understand how you interact with this infrastructure. So with that, we're kind of done our slides. Darren, I guess you can make yourself present and start asking us questions.
Great. Well, thank you very much. That was truly awesome, and there are sort of a bunch of questions coming through quite a lot. And thank you very much for popping that slide up, because we're not going to get through anywhere near all of them, I'm afraid. So for people on the webinar, if you can see the contact details of the people in the slide, they're all willing, to, take questions via email from you. So if we can't get to your specific question, feel free to fire away. Maybe just kick off with just a few kind of observations I made during the course of the presentation, and there really is a sort of there's a bunch of those. The first thing was that Canada's been on the cycling journey, and and everything seems to build on everything else. Or this is just at least my observation from here, sort of down under in New Zealand, that Montreal, obviously a pioneer in doing protected cycle infrastructure, a leader in North America, and generally pretty well regarded as a cycling city. We recently had a SFU webinar with Bartosz Karamalski from Velo Quebec, sort of on that, which is available if you're interested in that. Vancouver, sort of a number of years ago, started delivering a protected cycleway grid in the downtown peninsula, generally kind of one major street, often quite controversially at a time, but over the course of a number of years managed to build out that network and achieve some pretty impressive results as a result of that. Over on Vancouver Island, the Victoria project by the City of Victoria with Urban Systems and Brian Patterson, who's on the session this morning, with the very striking observation that their protected or shared path network kind of ended where you needed it most, where you reached the downtown core, and focusing on delivering a network of protected cycleways there. Moving on to the Calgary cycle track pilot, which went for to test something that was implemented all at once as a pilot, and has since been confirmed as permanent by the City Council in Calgary, and now Edmonton, which is a further evolution of this approach, which is of all of the approaches the fastest from planning to implementation. So what's really striking, or to me, has been the degree of kind of how everything in Canada has been sort of building on one another, and how one city in Canada has inspired others within the country. Very much the recent kind of focus on building out from the core of your network. This is exactly the same approach we're following in Auckland, inspired by Vancouver and other places. That your primary destination, most of your trips are in your downtown core, and therefore, logically, that is the place where you're likely to attract the most riders. And really striking in the slide about how, when you put the downtown core together with the existing shared path network, including the Mill Creek Ravine that I rode with Tyler a year or so ago, those sorts of networks, plus all the other plans that you've got for protected cycleways on 102 Ave and 83 Ave, et cetera, you're starting to build out a real network, but starting from the place that's going to generate you the success first. So I'm not sure if Canada's quite fully aware of this, but Canada's really leading a lot of that thinking and doing it in a much more systematic way than a lot of other cities in North America, a lot of US cities. I mean, there are kind of standout cities in the US, that New York City and Seattle in particular are doing good stuff. Minneapolis and San Francisco, yes, to an extent. I'll just make a couple of other observations, and then a couple of questions for the panel. I'm just trying to synopsize some of the questions that are coming through the question panel, and there are a whole bunch of other there's a whole bunch of other questions that have popped in, and yes, we will make the slides from the presentation available to everybody, including the audio that goes with them, so that will be on coming up sort of later. Okay, so one of the, from what Conrad was saying, there was a story of the student who was hit and died on White Ave. One of the terrible things we do as cities is that we often react when something terrible happens, and that is a time that we react fast. That sometimes lumbersome public sector bureaucracies are galvanized into an action at an extraordinary speed that really should be our business as usual, that we should be knowing where the danger spots are, where the grey spots are, and building to do that. We had a very similar instance in Auckland. Jane Bishop, who was a British nurse in New Zealand on a working holiday visa, was cycling home on Tamaki Drive, which is the busiest route for cycling in Auckland, as Tyler will attest. Not exactly the best infrastructure. A car driver pulled into a parking space, opened the door of the car, stepped out. She moved out of the way of the door and into the path of a truck and died. And this was a known cycle safety black spot that had been alerted by cycle advocates, and where within a number of days, the 3 parking spaces that created this danger area had been removed. But that should have happened before. So I really kind of hate that kind of we react after the fact to a tragedy that was in fact preventable. So Conrad also talked about Gil Peñalosa. I am a big believer in change agents. I'm a big believer in people who can make a change in conversations. And in fact, we had Gil Peñalosa in New Zealand, and Gil Peñalosa certainly had a big impact on us. And our cycling conversation in Auckland, the people who made an impact on moving our thinking away from vehicular cycling in a 30k environment as being acceptable for all ages and abilities was Brent Todderin, and most particularly and very influentially Chris and Melissa Bruntlett, who we brought down in 2014 as we'd just implemented our first on-road protected cycleway. So having these change agents, these people who can tell stories and communicate about the power of an all ages abilities network. And it's not the network, it's about the people who use the network. It's there to enable everyday cycling by everyday people for a range of purposes in street clothes, just like we're all wearing at the moment. The advocacy conversation, that's incredibly important, and that was one of the things I was most interested in here. I think in our city we have a pretty good advocacy conversation. We just made it onto City Lab for Greater Auckland's role in with the Congestion-Free Network for Auckland, which is now official party policy in our national election campaign. Powers of People have clearly had a really important role, because to move from a situation of just being really angry about the lack of infrastructure and the almost kind of assumed default assumption that this is the way things have to be, to a situation that you've delivered a really great network in such a short space of time, that's truly remarkable. And as Conrad attested, I think one of the most underrated species on the entire planet is people who work in public sector agencies or municipalities in those roles. These roles have a high public, political and stakeholder exposure, and they have kind of often fairly elevated degrees of thanklessness associated with the role. These are really tough roles to do. I mean, Tyler's been on that role on the inside when he was the City of Edmonton. Olga's clearly been somebody who's been able to push through change in an organisation. So having great, passionate staff, just the super resilience that you need to get through things. There will be resistance. There are difficult conversations. There are various parts of the organisation and stakeholders to bring on the journey. All of those final success factors were just so, they're just so crucial. So, to bring them all together, and in particular to try and as much as possible to build a consensus in support of that from road user groups as well, and from your police service. That we've managed to do that in New Zealand. That the Automobile Association, the truck lobby here, are supporters of protected cycleway infrastructure, for the simple fact that it makes things much less stressful for their truck drivers or their car drivers if cyclists are in a safe, protected environment. So I think that's me talking a bit. Perhaps the only other comment I make is, one of the risks you get, and we've heard this risk in my city of Auckland, is this idea that you do a downtown bike grid, and we're doing a protected cycleway grid in our downtown core much vastly more slowly than you are, and somehow that once we've done it's over, we've ticked the cycling box. I mean, we can go back to business as usual. No, this is a really good initial step that kind of builds you up to the next thing. So just wondering if anybody from the panel wanted to make any comments on that kind of remarkable shift that Edmonton's gone through. I mean, Tyler, you're talking about how bike lanes were being taken out, just only a few years ago, to now in 2017, a network being delivered at such speed, and from what I understand, the increase in use has been quite high as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I could add is, as quickly as the network was implemented, we're seeing that sharp rise in people using the network. Just to give you an idea, 100th Ave was and is probably the most contested portion of our downtown bike network. In looking at some of Tyler's work and identifying potential routes, 100th Avenue was still under capacity in terms of traffic operations, but probably for motorists, one of the most convenient routes. 2 lanes in each direction, no dedicated turning facilities. So at any time, if you had a left turning vehicle and a right turning vehicle, no one was really moving. But one of the things that happened was once we installed the network on 100th Avenue, we went from our initial early capture pre-bike route of 390 cyclists captured in a 24-hour period to over 1,300 cyclists captured in a 24-hour period, and that was within the first week that the bike network was open. So that was astonishing. I did not expect that we were going to be over 3.5 times the numbers. I was expecting at least double. So that was really great to see. And I do understand that when we talk about measurement, that now that we have these protected routes, more people are choosing to use them. So maybe those cyclists were distributed elsewhere along the downtown, but still, regardless of that, we know that 1,300 cyclists a day and growing are using 100th Avenue, and that's 1,300 cyclists that are now protected from any sort of danger in mixing with traffic.
We saw the same thing in Calgary. We tracked the usage, and so they had counters more broadly around the downtown, and so these are rough numbers. Don't quote me, although I guess this is recorded, but it's something like a third previous users, a third attracted from other routes, and a third of new users is kind of what we use as a rule of thumb. So I hate to say I told you so, but I figured there'd be a lot of use on these things. And we also know the conversion of like a 4-lane street without turn bays to a 3-lane, you can actually make the operations a lot more efficient even for people driving. So it's a pretty low hanging fruit really to make some fairly significant improvements to your city.
Yeah, exactly the same experience in Auckland. We've got the outer ring of our protected cycleway network pretty much in place now. We've doubled cycling into our city centre. As a result of that, we've still got more bits to build of that. But to Tyler's point, I mean, our entire city centre is basically in a complete road diet for City Rail Link construction, which is our underground rail loop. And basically, most of our east-west capacity is down by 50%. The monitoring of traffic impacts on that is that out of 4 out of 6 of the corridors that we're monitoring, the traffic is actually flowing better than before construction, because because people are not getting to the to the pinch points. They're actually being filtered to the pinch points in a better way. So it is actually helping the overall network work better. And so this is often counterintuitive, and that was the New York City experience with pedestrianisation of Broadway through Times Square, is that sometimes you have these counterintuitive results, is that if you provide the network, people make the choice. They'll either change mode, they'll change the time of their trip, they'll might not do the trip at all or link it to other trips, or share a ride or do whatever. The speed, again, it's just remarkable. I mean, there's so many internal stakeholders, there's so many things you actually need to do. I mean, you'd have to talk to ETS, to the transit system, and you need to talk to all your operations folks and maintenance protocols and God knows what else. I mean, perhaps Olga, I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, you know what? It was, I'll be honest, it was probably the most uncomfortable 8 months of my career. It was, there were a lot of hard conversations, a lot of upset colleagues, you know, internal and some external stakeholders as well, and you know, you know, quite frankly, we knew that it was going to be difficult, and I knew it was going to be difficult. You know, we're also a city that's in the middle of a massive reorganization, so you know that stresses are running high in these situations as well. But I think, and you know, quite frankly speaking, I think the people that I was able to tap into this project, to be involved in this project, were chosen on purpose. And you know, these people were tapped because I know that they were doers, and you know, despite any immediate discomforts, you know, we would get through it, and you know, and be able to, and you know, and we asked for forgiveness a lot, and to this day we're still asking for forgiveness often. But you know, the guiding light always being that, you know, at the end of the day, we're going to have this incredible network that we will all be proud of and we're all a part of. And you know, it's actually really great to see that when, you know, I had a colleague that was really that was part of this project, and you know, not necessarily positive about the speed, but you know, now they've completely turned around, and you know, they're sending me little tidbits of its success. And so I think that's, like, we really, this project, even though it was such a culture shift for Edmonton, and Edmonton as a you know, as the downtown transportation network, it was also a culture shifting project for us in administration. So you know, yeah, a lot of hard work and a lot of asking for forgiveness, that's for sure.
Yeah, and also a lot of, yeah, kind of a lot of collaboration, but a huge amount of personal energy and resilience, presumably from the project team. I mean, it's just, yeah.
And courage. I'd like to throw that word out. There are a lot of people showed courage for this project to happen. From you know, the people at Stantec who decided to you know, put their necks out, to the councillors who put the motion forward. I think our mayor did a bunch of work, and Olga and her team. So it's not easy. It's always easiest to not take the risk, right? So I you know, really appreciate. And like another thing, this is an election year, so I actually thought City Council was going to punt this to next summer. But you know, they went for it, and so that's quite amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like, absolutely, it's a huge risk. Like this project from start to finish was a huge risk, but you know what? Like, absolutely needed. Now that we're seeing people on the grid, it's already shown its success. So I think we moved away from risk into okay, actually this was a really good idea.
Yeah, and I think what you'll find is a relatively quick, you know, shift in attitudes towards cycling, becoming, you know, will become more positive, and we've certainly experienced that over the past 3 years. One other question I was going to ask, which was around, you know, why focus downtown, but I think you've really effectively answered that. You know, the graphic that just showed how they connected into all of the existing routes, plus all the other projects that you're delivering, which is, you know, which is kind of really the next thing is what's next, because you deliver this great thing, you're just exhausted, you just want to have a lie down for several weeks, and you know, afterwards.
We're just ramping up at Pass for People, so we're ramping up for the next wave.
Yeah, and you know what? And actually, yes, I intend to take a short rest, but but there is no rest actually for us in administration, because you know, I think it's important to note that that this project is being evaluated over the course of the next 18 months, and so, you know, in the interim, any lessons that we learn from the rapid implementation process, we hope to be able to apply elsewhere. And, you know, again, looking at, you know, 2017, 2018, we're going to see some major connections achieved, you know, and actually giving us a true core network. The intent is to grow, and we are working on our bike plan as well to grow beyond just the core network. So that work is constantly going, and I'm sure Conrad will keep myself and my team busy, or others busy over the course of the next little while too. But again, yeah, you know, the advocacy is such an important role in keeping this momentum going, and I think that that we've shown some good numbers and some good usage, and a great place to invest, you know, into our core neighborhoods.
And I suspect that if anything of our experience has been that some of the biggest gains we've got in cycling ridership is on the pre-existing links that are actually now connected into a protected network, where you can actually get to within a block or two of your destination on protected infrastructure. So the connectors actually benefit really substantially because they don't dump you in some hideous traffic sewer or a place that's fundamentally unsafe to cycle in.
Yep.
And yeah. So there are there's a whole bunch of questions. Apologies, no way I'm going to get through to.
Yeah. Sorry, Darren. Darren, you talked about that connectivity, and you know, actually, it's important that I should note this as well. So I'm actually curious if this is probably going to be the most studied bike network in Edmonton, because you know we've had a road safety audit. We're looking at an in-service safety audit. But also too, we do have some further evaluation on connectivity of this network to our other networks, and that's happening through the University of Alberta. So, you know, again, you know, we'll know a lot more after this period of study on where we go next.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me was you're saying that you really didn't have any standards to work off, and that Alberta is actually developing standards for protected cycleways, and similarly we rely a lot on Austroads, and Austroads designs really well for harmonious flow of traffic, but not so much for, you know, for that sort of infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like we've used NACTO as a guide, and actually Tyler mentioned CRO. We ended up getting an updated CRO manual this year as well. But between NACTO, CRO, and the Transportation Association of Canada and their bikeway design guide, that's really all we had. But we don't really have an Alberta type of design guide. Again, our legislation is a little different in some cases. So, you know, some of those things come in handy, but when you don't have anything in place, it's and you're looking at rapidly implementing, and not even so much rapidly, but building out of a bike network, those standards do come in handy.
So yeah, Tyler, you could plug the protected cycleway guide that you've worked on at this point in time.
Yeah, I will insert myself into this conversation. So I think there's two guides that are really important for people to, well, at least two, that are available now. The Transportation Association of Canada has the new geometric design guide for Canadian roads. We were involved in co-authoring or lead authoring 2 new chapters for that manual, which was typically a more rural highway type focused document, which is now has urban streets, as well as 2 new chapters, which is what we led, the pedestrian integrated design and bicycle integrated design. So that has a lot more information for municipalities across the country, and you can use it down under too. You just have to flip stuff around, Darren, because you guys are driving the wrong side of the road, but everybody else can use it too.
You drive on the wrong side of the road. You're the only Commonwealth country that drives on the right.
Well, we're right, you're wrong. So the last one is the ITE practitioner's guide for protected bikeways. Myself and colleague Ryan Martinson, who was instrumental in the Calgary network, we co-authored that for the Institute with a lot of help from other really great practitioners within North America, including Bartek, who you mentioned from Velo Quebec, and Bill Schulteis from Tool Design Group. Rock Miller was involved as well from Stantec. And Bill's team actually at Tool have produced a really great free guide for Massachusetts DOT on separated bike lanes, which is also very good. And the Federal Highway Administration in the States also has a recent guide that is out there. But the ITE guide, kind of, if you're starting into this and you don't really know where to start, I think it's a pretty good resource, and I believe it should be available. It's available for purchase right now in print copy, but we're working on an electronic copy as well that hopefully it gets more information on this week, which is rapidly finishing, I guess. But
well, for you, we're in the weekend already here.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, you're in the past, we're in the future, so just remember that.
Yep.
Okay, so there's so many questions. So there's been a number of questions. Is bike share on the agenda for Edmonton? Generally you want to have a critical mass of protected infrastructure in place before you'd even contemplate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were approached. I think a few of us were in administration were approached individually about bike share, and but it was clear that previously. Before me on this project, when bike share was looked at by administration, it was critical that we had at least a minimum core network, and that's something that we didn't have when the question was initially asked, and I would say now we have half of a core network to make it feasible. But it's definitely on the horizon at some point.
And from our point of view, we're going to the Bike Share conference at the end of the month in Montreal, and we intend to produce a report on how to bring Bike Share to Edmonton next summer.
These guys, nothing but rapid over here. Yeah, I think the critical point is to have infrastructure, right? I mean, like, bike share is really great for as an extension to your transit network, but if you don't have the infrastructure to make it feel safe and comfortable, nobody's going to use it. And if you're going to try to attract tourists to use bike share, if you don't have protected lanes, it's going to be really difficult, I think, to get them to use that infrastructure. So, and the nice thing is that it's evolving quite a bit, bike share, where you don't necessarily need the really expensive docking stations. There's different providers out there now that provide a little bit more flexibility, more like our Pogo car share type environment where you can use your app, a phone-based app to find bikes. So that's really great too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I just went to a investment logic mapping workshop for our bike share scheme. We're starting the business case process, but people saying, why do we have bike share? Well, we need to have the critical mass of infrastructure in place. We absolutely do, and I think that's a key part of it. Things we Levy from Montreal was asking the question about unidirectional versus bidirectional protected bike lanes. So is there any comment from anyone on that, of the basically choosing bidirectional on one side of the road?
I could start if you want, Olga, and then you could sort of talk about
it.
The reason we did it in Calgary was it's bidirectional on one-way streets, so it's a little bit more straightforward. Thinking about bringing this in the rapid environment that we did in Edmonton, we were trying to minimize impacts, which means that a two-way facility on a two-way street requires a lot more signaling and markings for the conflict zones, because there's two-way people driving both ways as well as cycling both ways. But one of the big things that we find in winter cities is the need to actually snow clear, and the preference is to try to use as much standard equipment as possible instead of buying specialty equipment, particularly if you need to move a lot of snow. Some of the small equipment just can't do it. So by going bidirectional, there's a really marginal increase in width to do bidirectional compared to what you need to do with unidirectional, and allow it to be open for snow maintenance throughout the year. So that's kind of how we pitched it as part of the feasibility study and why we landed on it. I think if you look at literature, unidirectional do have better overall safety performance. But I think there are tactics that we suggested in the feasibility study that Olga's team has taken on board and implemented in other ways as well to manage those conflicts at the intersections.
Is there anything else you wanting to throw in, Olga, or does that cover it off. It's the same thing we do in Auckland. I mean, we have a single traffic lane that we reallocate from general traffic, a 3.5 metre lane. So we do 3 metres, 1.5 metres per direction, plus a 500 mil, protected buffer. And it, just in terms of not moving curbs or just minimising rework, we don't allow our equivalent of your, right turn on red. So, there's no, in New Zealand you can't turn left against a red light, and we do a lot of what we call ped protection arrows. So if we're running a parallel pedestrian phase, we'll ban the turning movement against the pedestrian phase. So we're really used to that approach. So it's often about your signals design, and I'm glad that you've brought your signals into the 21st century as a result of this project. So thanks to cycling for doing that for the downtown core of Edmonton, because that's a huge co-benefit to be able to synchronize and run your signals together, and adapt your signal plans when you have big events at the arena or whatever it happens to be.
Signaling is usually that's a big win. Actually, wherever we've worked on bikeway cycle track projects, sometimes traffic engineers can be a little bit resistant to thinking about bikes and walking, but when you can pitch to them, hey, as part of this project, we're going to give you a bunch of new equipment that you've been dying to have, it can sometimes get people on board relatively quickly, and then work with them to do the signal timing changes that make sense for all modes.
Because I think that's sometimes undersold as a benefit of doing that you're actually, you're giving yourself the tools to get traffic to flow better in your city centre through better management and optimization tools. And it's charged to the cycling budget. It's claimed as a cycling budget expense, but you're actually delivering benefits to all road users. Okay, so questions about obviously attractive visitors, about the positive environmental benefits for greenhouse gas emissions or whatever. And does Edmonton do an inventory of that sort of stuff? Of GHG, greenhouse gases, greenhouse gas emissions, and
you know what? I'm not too sure. I know that there's been monitoring in the past that's been done with a third party, but for this project, I know that we're not monitoring, but that's a good question I can take back actually.
Yeah, and it's just an overall it makes a contribution. It's walking and cycling are the modes of transport that are no real greenhouse emissions unless you fart.
I think made reference to whether advocates are using greenhouse gases as a leverage, and I would say that I as a lever, I guess, I haven't seen a lot of that, and we've actually focused almost entirely on lifestyle and safety. So and health. I mean, there's just so many benefits to getting someone on a bike, right? I guess maybe that's largely come from my philosophy that just seeing that most people won't do something for the good of the earth, they just won't, and that's human nature, and so I guess rather than play up that, since it is only one of so many benefits, I think that that it plays more, and you get a lot more value for just telling someone, it's going to make your life awesome. Get on that bike, get outside, right? Edmonton, rule in the summer, that kind of thing. So that's been our aim.
Yeah, and internally, actually I should mention it, internally, and this is actually more geared to city employees, but we run our Smart Trip program, and so initially it was part of the transportation department, and it was geared to getting employees from transportation to think about sustainable means of getting to work. And so leaving the car at home, or if you are going to take your car, carpool, use transit, use a bike. And the tool was actually quite great, because it was this wonderful dashboard where you can log how many kilometers your trip was by bike, and it would tell you how much you saved in greenhouse gases. And so, internally we have that push, and now that's moved beyond the transportation department, and it's farther reaching. So we're we're addressing all City of Edmonton employees on what their environmental impact is. And actually, like when you look at it at the end of the day, it adds up quite a bit. But that's something internal for us. I wish that we could do it for everyone else.
I think like the general response to that question, I would say, is that it depends on your community. You need to figure out what messages work well and play well. We do work in communities where environmental thoughts and considerations are really, really important to that community, and so using that type of messaging is really critical. In communities like Edmonton, it doesn't seem like that is a really strong motivator. Safety and health are bigger motivators in this market, so I think you just have to be smart and sometimes do some market research to understand what the motivators are for the community.
Yeah, and it's not always the same, but I'd say that people here will say, oh, they'll catch the bus or they'll ride to be green, inverted commas, but that's a kind of a co-effect rather than the primary driver. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of an ancillary effect rather than, we're a country that purportedly is clean and green, and, Pure New Zealand being our brand. Question for Tyler from Trevor from Victoria is about your Lego Man videos. There's a really great story there.
Well, I guess, so when I was back at the city, we were looking at education program to understand, even just at that time we were just building as bike lanes, right? And there was different lines on the street and what we were doing. So we created a bunch of stop motion animation videos with Lego and had a local production company do that. We actually set up initially a big display of Lego. This is my love of Lego. I'm gonna start ranting here pretty soon. But anyway, so Lego.
We'll just cut you off.
You're one of those kids.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we built a whole model to represent the city of Edmonton because we had approved a new transportation master plan, and we wanted to communicate that. We were invited to the Science Center here, and they were doing an exhibit about the history of transportation. And it was a Lego traveling exhibit. So they said, well, why don't you, we know that you just approved this new plan, why don't you come and talk about what the future will look like for Edmonton, not like flying cars, Jetsons future, but like more immediate future with light rail and that kind of thing. And so, our communications folks were thinking more traditional, like boards and that kind of stuff, and I said, no, we're going to build a Lego city. So I got some approval to buy a bunch of Lego, and it was amazing to engage with kids in that event. And then, because we had this Lego, we were able to use it for other educational purposes, and so we used it to build these videos to help educate about certain types of infrastructure. I would say that a lot of the videos that we made were really important for the time, and now we've probably moved past those because we're, the implementation of bike lanes, for instance, painted bike lanes is not that common. We're rewriting the design standards right now for the city of Edmonton, and I think their use is going to be limited quite extensively, so you'll be seeing more. So you'll be seeing more protected lanes, and there weren't Lego videos about that. I don't know what the city's plans are for new videos, but I think there was some issue around copyright.
Yeah. I think it was when the education team was looking at a fun message, Lego was the choice. But we were told no more Lego, buy Lego, unfortunately. But the same education team that put together the Lego concept is also, they're the ones that actually built out the education campaign for this project as well. But again, a bit of a different approach. Some animations, more live videos, that sort of thing. So unfortunately, no Lego.
Mm-hmm. That's too bad. Yeah, the team at the City of Edmonton, I gotta say, for education, they've been doing a wonderful job producing really tangible and smart and concise information for folks. They have the street team, like the street ambassadors, like they did in Calgary as well, but the pamphlets and everything that they've been doing in the videos have been fantastic. So they deserve a lot of credit for this project for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, back in the day, I had the sensitive new age regional creature. That was the snark. Was my little kind of in the shape of an A because I worked for the regional council, but the snark had to be retired, and I had to grow up and become more mature, or at least pretend to be. Mm-hmm. So I think we probably need to wrap this up about now. There's a heap of questions, and I'm sorry that we've only got to a small fraction of them. There's still 77 of you here, and So the email addresses are sitting down on the bottom of the screen. So do note them down if you want to reach out. There's quite a lot of Edmonton-based questions and some interesting technical questions there. Conrad's obviously from the public advocacy conversation, which I think is tremendously important there. Tyler and Olga have had technical background in cycling and deeply rooted in the city of Edmonton. Just wondering if any final comments or thoughts from any of all of you.
I guess what I'll start. This despite this project being a very rapidly implemented, a lot of frustration at times. I think it's added a lot of value to the city itself. We talked a lot about Edmonton early on when we would address our downtown stakeholder community, and one of the more salient points for a lot of them was that as a major Canadian city, Edmonton did not have any sort of cycling infrastructure, and in fact, smaller cities like Thunder Bay had beat us to the punch. Our downtown business community are a competitive group, and what that meant to them was that, hey, we're not able to attract talent in these tougher economic times. So this meant that something like this and this type of project would be able to attract people to Edmonton, attract the tech sector, younger people that are looking for careers in Edmonton. So think about it as a culture shift, definitely, if you're entering this realm.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to build on that. That's really why we had agreed to work with Conrad on the initial white paper, which then turned into what it did. But Stantec is moving to the tower behind Olga, right to there, in next fall. And so we, as an employer of 1,500 to 1,700 people in this city, really wanted to make sure that people could get to work safely. Right now, we have pretty good access actually from the pathways and then quiet residential streets to get to our office just to the west of downtown. But when we move downtown, we're going to have way less parking, and we're going to be having people arriving more and more on light rail, transit, walking, and cycling. And cycling was the gap. And so that's why we, Keith Shillington here showed a lot of leadership to say, yeah, this is really important to us. This is important to our staff, and we want to make this investment in our community. And so he was willing to partner with Paths for People on this, and then it obviously changed a little bit from the initial concept, but we hung on there and could leverage obviously our experience in other markets, including Calgary, to provide some good guidance, hopefully, to set the framework at least for Olga's team.
Yeah, and so for me, I think if Calgary hadn't have done this, I don't think that it would have been possible. So if you're listening and you're from a winter city in Canada, now we have two of them that have done this. It's totally possible. So use us to as a lever to get more where you are. Also, I think that engaging businesses is critical. So Stantec's leadership really can't be undersold, or I can't overstate it. That like the mayor in his State of Address speech mentioned Stantec, stepping up, and so make relationships with businesses, reach out to leaders, because the people who kind of generally are haters of the bike stuff generally respect the business community's opinion. So if you can bring them on board, I think that's critical. So, and yeah, thanks to everyone who's involved in this project. It's been amazing.
Yeah, and such an amazing kind of partnership project, and it's a really great project. So thank you all to the panelists and all the participants for participating. Thanks for Frank Pacella from SFU. This will come online on the SFU website in a short space of time. So thanks very much, and have a great rest of your Friday as it is in Canada, or Saturday as it is in New Zealand.